Assalamu alaikum. Before you begin this video, just quickly wanted to let you know that so much of the work on the Quran has been completed on Bayyinah TV. I want you to enjoy systematically studying the Quran from the beginning all the way to the end in brief and then in great detail. And to do that, I'd like for you to sign up on bayyinahtv.com. And once you appreciate what's going on in Bayyinah TV, I want you to become an ambassador for it and share that subscription with friends and family and give it as a gift also. Thank you.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. الذين يأكلون الربا لا يقومون إلا كما يقوم الذي يتخبطه الشيطان من المس. ذلك بأنهم قالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا وأحل الله البيع وحرم الربا. فمن جاءه موعظة من ربه فانتهى فله ما سلف وأمره إلى الله ومن عاد فأولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. فالحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد, everyone, once again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. So, there are two things I want to give you as a disclaimer that I will not be talking about when it comes to this ayah, and then we'll talk about what we will talk about in this ayah. So the first thing I will not be talking about is fatwa and details in regards to what riba is. This is an ayah about riba, and riba is a very serious subject in our religion. It is one of the greatest sins that Allah Azza wa Jal has talked about. In fact, it's one of the ancient sins also. So Allah describes that this was something that the Banu Israel were also condemned with. In the list of crimes that they committed among killing the prophets, Allah also mentioned aklihimur riba, that they would consume riba, right? So it's not a small matter. And I think that we are living in an age of oversimplification. So we shouldn't just casually mention something and then not give it its due. It's something that I think every Muslim should try their best to educate themselves in. And because there are complications involved with the subject, I will talk about that a little bit. Why there may be complications with that subject, because the economy of the world at the time of the Quran was very simple and straightforward. And ever since the emergence of worldwide banking, which all of us are a part of, the economy and the structure of fundamental economy has completely changed. So how did the ancient economies of the world compare with the modern economies of the world, and how can we tally what applies of those principles and what doesn't apply? This requires a lot of serious work. And oversimplifying that is irresponsible by those who say all of it is haram, or by any who says all of it is halal. I think it's an oversimplification and it's dangerous. And one of the things, unfortunately, the age in which we live, the simpler you can make your content, and the quicker you can say something, it can go viral, because we're obsessed with the virality of content, right? So we'll just say sound bites and say something so it can spread far and wide. And what that's done is it's taken the opportunity for Muslims to engage in deep, intelligent conversation about something away. Because now we just hear a soundbite and we know what Islam says about something. So the seriousness with which we study something has now been reduced. Now, it just compared this even just a little bit. If somebody was talking about heart surgery, right, which is a life and death issue, you wouldn't listen to a TikToker and make a decision about your heart health. Right, you'd listen, and if you were diagnosed with a cardiac problem, then you'd go to a specialist and you'd get a second and third opinion before you arrive at a conclusion, because this is a matter of life and death. But when it comes to matters of our deen, I heard it on YouTube, right? I saw it on TikTok, and that's good enough. Like, it's because this thing is serious; it requires a lot of research. But this, Islam is, it's casual, and we shouldn't take these kinds of matters casually. But anyway, so that's one thing I won't be talking about. The other thing I won't be talking about is jinn possession, because this ayah is also talking about being touched by the shaitan, and that's actually the parable that we're discussing today. I have shared my views on the possession of jinn, which is similar to the views of many before in our history, like Imam Razi, rahimahullah, or Ibn Ashur, rahimahullah, and others. And I've talked about it in other places in detail. In fact, even these ayat, I've done a discussion on these ayat in depth. That wasn't a jinn. So I've done a discussion on these ayat in depth before. It's available on Bayna TV. And I actually was listening to myself talk about these ayat today, which is annoying. I hate my voice on there, but from like 6-7 years ago. And there's some things I'd like to add to what I said before also. But anyway, let's get right into it. So we're still in Surah Al-Baqarah, and you've heard multiple examples Allah has given now on spending in Allah's path, and spending with the wrong, in the wrong way, with the wrong intention, or the follow-up is incorrect. We've gone through all of that, right? And then we talked about the garden being burnt down yesterday with the old person, and that beautiful and powerful and scary image. Now we come to the flip side. So what Allah has done at the end of Surah Al-Baqarah is He's given us an entire curriculum on money. So it begins with spending in the path of Allah, money related, which is the best thing you can do with your money. And then He's going to talk about the worst thing you can do with your money, which is going to be riba and predatory practices. So that's this subject. In fact, there's no place in the Quran that is more detailed on the subject of riba than this place. Just like there is no place more detailed on spending in the path of Allah than this place. So first came spending in the path of Allah. Then came the spending in the path of shaitan, you can call it. Right? So those two things are put next to each other. Right? And then what's left? Well, at the end of that, the people of evil practices of riba, they say, well, what are you talking about? Business is the same thing. There's no difference between business and riba. They say that. So what does Allah do? Allah then, the third subject is, what is business and what are loans that are legitimate? So actually spending in the path of Allah, spending in the evil way, or earning in an evil way, and then finally business and loan transactions that are legitimate, that are halal. So the best you can do with your money, the worst you can do with your money, the halal that you can do with your money, all three are put together in one place. And that's your entire, it's like Quranic economics, if you will, right? And it's all put in one place here at the end in Surah Al-Baqarah. It's also interesting that shaitan comes up a couple of times in this passage. And that's important to note, because shaitan has many attacks against humanity, and one of those attacks is actually greed. Greed is one of his great attacks, right? And in fact, greed is something, we have to understand what greed does. Greed makes you obsessed with something you want to get, and you don't care anymore if it's halal or haram because you've developed an obsession with acquisition, with getting it. And so now even the halal things that are available to you, you start becoming blind to them. And you're obsessed with the one thing that shaitan has put in your head that you have to have. This is actually very similar to the story of Adam alayhi salam, who was placed in Jannah. So there are plenty of things he could enjoy. There's every possible imaginable thing he can enjoy. But Iblis's job is to make him not think about all of Jannah, ignore all of Jannah, and slowly make him obsessed with that one tree that he's not supposed to go near. Right? So he's constantly trying to do some waswasa to him, and Allah describes in Surah Al-A'raf, دَلَّاهُمَا بِغُرُورٍ, that He reeled both of them in with a very careful deception. Dalla yudalli in Arabic is used for it comes from dalu. Dalu means a bucket. And in old times when you trap an animal, you put some food in the bucket and you're pulling the bucket and you little by little, and the animal's coming closer and closer and closer. This tadliya, this is actually what Allah describes Iblis did with Adam alayhi salam. So in order for him to be this close to even the tree, for both of our parents to be this close to the tree, the only way that could have happened is he makes them ignore all of the blessings that are actually available. Right? So there's a saying in Arabic, kullu mamnu'in matlub. Everything prohibited is desirable. Right? Like look at our kids. If you tell them not to touch something, you give them everything else on the planet. What's the one thing they want to go to? The one thing you told them not to touch. If you tell them, hey, I'm going over there, don't do this. Don't do you can do anything else you want, just don't touch that switch. This kid, even if he's not touching he's looking at it. I was like, can I just, Kullu mamnu' matlub. This is what shaitan's tactic is, right? And that's which is what greed is. Greed is, in one way you can think about greed is it's essentially becoming ungrateful to all the legitimate options and pushing yourself towards the not legitimate option, right? And that's why Iblis was mentioned in the story of Adam alayhi salam in the beginning, and now towards the end of the surah, it's actually tying up again and saying this is how the devil gets you. This is how the devil gets humanity. Ash-shaytanu ya'idukum al-faqr. The devil will promise you bankruptcy, right? And the devil was promising Adam alayhi salam bankruptcy in some sense, right? And now it's coming. And then ya'murukum bil-fahsha, which is similar in echo from what was happening in the story of Adam alayhi salam. Anyway, so now let's get to this ayah. It begins with الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ الرِّبَى. A literal translation would be those who eat riba. Those who eat riba. And I've translated it in more dignified ways. Those who consume riba. That sounds nicer, right? But quite literally, it's saying those who eat riba, and that's purposeful because other places in the Quran, when Allah talks about eating, He says, "Kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum." Eat, or if you want to say consume from the good and pure things that we've provided you. That sounds really dignified. If you say they're eating from what they earned, that sounds dignified. But they're eating money sounds undignified. It's almost like you're talking about someone as if you're talking about them engaged in animalistic behavior, right? They're just mowing and eating, right? And there's also the interesting kind of correlation. Riba, the word riba comes from raba. And raba yarbu, the verb in Arabic, is similar to the word that came before, jannatin bi rabwatin. Few ayat before, the garden that's in a high place. Riba is literally that which grows. That which grows. Because the person who's, in the ancient times, they gave you some money. They gave you some gold coins or some silver coins or whatever. They give you 5 silver coins and they say, well, I want it back in a year, but I want 6 coins back. Or I want 7 coins back. They want that 5 coins to grow, right? And if you're not able to pay it back, then you're going to have to work for me for 2 years. Or you're going to have to give me a part of your farm. Or you're going to have to give up a couple of your trees. Or you know what, I'll take a couple of your kids as my servants. This is how slavery actually came into humanity. You would lend somebody money. If they weren't able to pay you back, now they're indentured to you. Now you can consume their property little by little, or you can consume them eventually, right? This is the nature of riba. You're growing your empire in this way by lending people money, and especially who borrows money? People that need it, people that are desperate, right? And you're actually even hoping at some level that they're not able to pay back. Because if they're not able to pay back, you can take way more than what was owed to you, right? You can take them, you can take their children. And then you have generations of slaves that you own, or you can take all of their animals and invest those animals and things like that. This is the nature of this creature, this thing, this evil practice called riba. So those who eat riba. Now, we should also understand this in context of what was said before. If you notice the previous ayat, Allah mentioned a sensitivity towards humanity. First of all, when you give, you shouldn't remind people that you're doing them a favor. When you give, you shouldn't expect anything in return. When you give, you should say qawlun ma'ruf. You should say things that are dignified. And if you're not able to give, you should ask for forgiveness, right? Then there are other ayat there that we didn't even cover. Allah talks about give people who don't even ask. La yas'aluna an-nasa ilhafa. Those are part of those ayat too. So you have to be so sensitive to giving that there's somebody in your community, you could tell from the look on your face, ta'rifuhum bisimahum, you could tell from the look on their face that they're not doing good. And they didn't come and stand in front of you, they didn't post a GoFundMe page, they didn't make a YouTube video and say, please give to me. They didn't put a social media comment and say, here's a link, you can send me some money. My father needs an operation, etc. You could just tell from the look on their face something is wrong. And you're supposed to be able to capture that and say, hey, can I help you in some way? Or don't even say, can I help you? Because when you say, can I help you? They'll say, no, jazakallah khairan. Right? Allah says, يَحْسَبُهُمُ الْجَاهِلُ أَغْنِيَاء مِنَ التَّعَفُّفِ. That the ignorant person thinks these people have no problem. They never asked, so they must not have a problem. Allah calls those people who lack that sensitivity, He calls them jahil. He calls them ignorant in that ayah. So we're supposed to develop this hypersensitivity towards those that we give. And who should we give? And we should be sensitive, why should we give? And when we give, we don't expect from them, and we don't bring it up to them. You're so concerned about those who you're giving. And then if you're giving them, you're actually planting a seed with Allah. You're getting rich. So actually, the people who you are giving to, they're doing you a favor. You're not doing them a favor. They're allowing you to plant a seed with Allah that multiplies endlessly, right? So your mentality towards giving completely changes and you become extremely grateful for the opportunity to help somebody else. On the flip side of this is predatory lending. Predatory lending is done by people who are hoping times go bad, and when times go bad, people come and ask them for a loan. And they're not giving them a loan because they care about humanity. They care about a loan. They give a loan because it's the most secure way of growing their wealth, right? And they would give the loan, and this happened in Europe, it happened in other parts of the world. There were always these loan sharks, right, in ancient times, people that have good amount of money, and they'll let you borrow some of it, and you can do something for them and pay back. Or they used to have different forms of riba. One form of riba was, I'll give you 1,000, let's say 1,000 dinar, or 1,000 pounds, $1,000, whatever it is, right? And you're going to pay me a fee every month for 2 years, and at the end of those 2 years, you have to give me my 1,000 back too. So that was a form of riba. Now we have a slightly nuanced version of that. You have to make a mortgage payment or a monthly payment, minimum payment, right? And maybe 20% of that is going towards the 1,000, and 80% is their service fee or the interest or whatever else. And they'll come up with fun names like transaction fee, boredom fee, your stupid fee, we're going to bleed you dry slowly fee, and they'll come up with 80 different names and add these fees, and only 20% of that went towards your $1,000 loan, and the other is just them consuming your money and eating away at your money, right? So this is the culture that they create. Now, on the flip side of that is interesting. The people who consume this kind of wealth, Allah says, لا يقومون. So first of all, they're eating riba, but they're not standing. Allah didn't say لا يكتسبون, they're not earning. He said لا يقومون, which is actually a majazi kind of statement. It's a borrowed phrase, and it was used as an isti'ara, as a borrowed term to describe people who have standing in society. So people who, of course, think of big bankers, right? Or, major wealthy people that are, lending people money. These people make good money, so they have a nicer house than everybody else. They have back in the day, they have a nicer horse than everybody else, which means nowadays they have a nicer car than everybody else. They have nicer clothes than everybody else. They have nicer shoes, nicer watches, nicer everything, right? And they roll by, and you can tell, wow, man, these people. And when their daughter or their son gets married, they book the grand palace or the ballroom, and you're like, man, these people, that's some serious cash, right? And they become this symbol of economic stability. These are the successful people in society. Everybody else is almost insects compared to them. They feed off of the desperation of the poor, and they go higher and higher, and everybody feels lower compared to them. They're the only ones standing tall. So it's almost that imagery of them towering over humanity that's being borrowed with لا يقومون. كما يقوم. But he says, Allah says, they're not standing, except if you want to understand what kind of standing they're in, إلا كما يقوم الذي يتخبطه الشيطان من المس. It's a difficult phrase to translate, but Allah says, and it is as though the only way they're standing is something similar to the ka is adatu tashbih, so it's used to make a comparison. So what's the comparison? Like somebody standing, يقوم الذي يتخبطه الشيطان, the one that the devil has beat to a pulp. If the devil has beat somebody to a pulp, khabata in Arabic is to hit something violently. The shepherd used to hit the tree violently until the leaves fall, and that was khabt from the devil, from the shepherd. The camel that's hungry or agitated, it used to strike its front legs on the ground, making the dust rise, like it's stomping on the ground. That's called khabt also, or khibta, right? So yatakhabbatuhu shaitan is actually khabatahu fatakhabbata. It's a combination of both. It's an idmaj of two verbs. What that means is it's as though the devil beat him so bad that he's taken a hard beating. And there's a really subtle jab in this ayah that person is actually being compared to shaitan himself. Not only has the devil beat him, he's almost turned into a shaitan. Because it would be khabatahu shaitan. But it's yatakhabbatuhu shaitan has this dual sense in it that this is person standing, but it's like they try to get up and the devil beats them down again. And they get up and the devil beats them down again. But then there's this other word that's being used, which is min al-mas, from the touch. Or you could say, I'd like to translate this, starting with a touch. You know, you've heard the phrase touched by an angel, right? This is the Quran's version of touched by a devil, right? Touched by a devil. So now there's two words. There's a hard beating and then there's a touch, which seems opposite. A touch is barely a, this is a mas. أقل درجة الإصابة في العربية المس. Right? The least amount of contact that you can have between two things is called mas. But khabat, which is what I just described to you, is a hard beating. It's like an MMA fight kind of beating. It's a ground and pound kind of situation, right? Two very different things. So what is Allah saying? Allah is saying it's as though somebody got beat down so violently, starting with just a touch. It started with just a touch, but eventually turned into a violent beating. So we're going to spend some time understanding this image. Somebody who's been beat up by the devil. Somebody's beat up by the devil. This was an Arabic expression back in the day, before the days of psychological analysis or neurological, scans, people being checked for brain damage or nerve imbalances or hormonal imbalances and things like that. Anybody who was acting in strange ways, anybody who had slurred speech, anybody who was going cross-eyed, anybody who was being delusional in their speech, or people, the people starting to lose their memory and things like that. Anybody exhibiting any kind of neurological problem, you know what the Arabs would say about them? Oh, the devil has touched them. So there were two words they used, majnoon, which is very famous, possessed by a jinn, but they also used mamsus, has been touched. They would call him mamsus also, from the same word mas. Now the idea of that, just to give you an image so you can appreciate that, imagine somebody like, there's interestingly, this is supposed to be a relatively more of a welfare society, the UK, but the number of homeless people y'all got in your city, whew, right? People just lying on the street with blankets in the rain, it's, and you'll see if you've been downtown or any kind of downtown where there's a lot of homeless people, and they've been out in that terrible environment for long enough, people don't talk to them. So they're around thousands of people and nobody talks to them, right? And they become isolated. And people are scared to even go in because they smell bad, they look a little crazy, they could be dangerous. If they're walking towards you, you're going to cross the street, right? They're crazy. And then you'll see that people like that, they'll start talking to themselves. They'll talk to themselves. They'll start yelling at society, these banks, they're robbing us. This guy's making a scene in the middle of the street. And this is a normal phenomenon around the world, right? People lose their mind and they're walking around and they're talking to themselves. And those kinds of people, when they become isolated and disturbed enough, then what happens is they become a danger to themselves and they become a danger to others. Because they lose all sense of time and responsibility and consequences. So they can they're so far gone that they could stab someone or push someone towards a bus, or do something crazy like that, but they will have no awareness of it. Like they won't think they did anything because they've lost their minds. Essentially, they've lost their minds. This kind of dangerous behavior was called, mamsus. But Allah has taken a step further. It started with a mas, but it's gotten a lot worse. So this person is crazy, they have no self-awareness, they have no idea what they're doing. They have no care or concern for the damage they're causing. And by the way, when someone doesn't care about the consequences or the damage they're causing, you know why? Because they no longer have the ability to think about the future. The only thing they think about what's in front of them right now, they act impulsively like animals. An animal acts immediately and impulsively, which is very important because the previous ayat were about spending in the path of Allah, and that's the person who's always thinking about their future. But these people, the consumers of riba, they don't care about the consequences of their actions and who it hurts and who it burns so long as they make their money. So what happened in society all over the world is these people look like they're dressed really well, they have the nicest houses, but when somebody doesn't make the payment, they don't go collect the money themselves. They got people for that. And those people go and they break some windows and they beat somebody up and they drag the woman and the child out of their home in front of or beat their father in front of them and say, next week we'll be back, right? They're not the gangsters, they're the one that pay the gangsters. And this was the way of the world for a long time. This was the way of for a very long time, until the Europeans figured out, especially the Italians from what I'm told, there's a better way to do this. We could just create banks, and we'll make this official. So instead of sending thugs, we'll just send them a letter. You're going to be evicted from your home in 2 weeks. And you know you have your medical bills? Yeah, you can't go to the hospital anymore because you're officially bankrupt, or you don't have the credit, or we're refusing to make the payment, or you defaulted on your payments, etc., etc. So if you have a heart condition, too bad. If your child needs surgery, too bad. That sounds like your problem. That's not our problem. And so how many people are being thrown out on the street? How many people become suicidal? How many families, how many children are ruined? How many people turn towards crime? They don't care because they make their money. Many of you remember the subprime mortgage crisis in 2007-8 time, right? During that time, the major banks and the major investment firms in the world, especially ones involved in real estate and banking and finance, their CEOs made enough money. The top 5% of the CEOs made more money then than ever before. So humanity was plunging into death, and they were making billions and billions and trillions of dollars. Actually, the top 5% had enough money to cover the entire crisis, and there would no longer be an economic crisis. But do they care? Do they even flinch? They're throwing champagne parties and hanging out with each other. Like there's no sense of consequence. There's no sense of humanity left. There's no self-awareness left. These people are possessed with wealth. They have more money than can be spent in multiple generations. Even if they wanted to spend all their money, they couldn't do it. That's how much money they got. But that doesn't matter because they're possessed. Allah is describing that level of greed that exists, that these people who look like they're standing, they're powerful, but they're not standing on anything. They're actually similar to someone who's walking down the street that looks like they've been touched by the devil. They've been beat by the devil. They've been beat senseless by shaitan. These people, and now imagine a society that is being run by a crazy homeless guy. And isn't it the case that today, the global societies of the world are being led by multi-billion and trillion-dollar corporations, the CEOs of which are all basically these ya'kuluna riba people. So where the world is being led by these psychos that have no concern for humanity. How many people will die? How many people will starve? How many children will suffer? Who cares? What's our return on investment this year, though? That's all that matters. How much money are we going to make? How much are we going to bank? This is the evil that Allah has exposed in this expression, إِلَّا كَمَا يَقُومُ الَّذِي يَتَخَبَّطُهُ الشَّيْطَانُ مِنَ الْمَسِّ. The other problem with this image also is similar to the image of Qarun. Because these people look like they made it, they make riba look good. Because they got a good life. Everybody looks at them and says, man, how do you get into that game? Right? And so people want to get like them. They want to become like them because they're the top elite, qa'im of the society. And so they set an evil standard and they make evil look good. So Allah says, for example, in other places, زَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالَهُم. The devil made their evil deeds look beautiful to them. The people of riba, one of their functions is they make insanity and this animal behavior, this inhumane behavior, look beautiful to others. And they drive others, it's like an insanity that spreads. So now, this craziness is being questioned. Why are you doing this? This is an evil practice. And to give you some idea of how this affects society, how riba affects society, I'll give you a simple example. It's one of the easiest examples you can think of. Homes, for example. Homes that somebody can't afford a home. So let's say in the 60s, they bought a home for 50,000 pounds. That sounds like an unimaginable number now. It's probably realistic back then in this country. But let's say they bought a home for 60,000, 50,000 pounds, right? But they got it on a mortgage, right? And it's a 30-year mortgage. How much did they end up paying by the end of that mortgage? Probably 150, 200, with all the fees and everything else. So they bought it for 50, but they ended up paying 200. Now it's time for them to sell it. The home is now brand new or 30 years older? 30 years. When a product is older, should it have more value or less value? Is the plumbing, the bricks, the foundation, the roof, the windows, the doors, are they better quality now or are they deteriorated now? They're deteriorated. But the value of the home, if you ended up spending 200, you ain't selling for, oh, I bought it for 50, I'll sell it for 55. No, 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 no. If I'm going to sell it, at least I'll sell it for 250, 300. That's what you're going to do. So now, what's happening as a result? Home prices within that one mortgage period, home prices went farther up. So the next generation that came, the previous generation could think about buying a home for 50. The next generation can't even think about buying a home until they get to 350. But they also, 250, they take a loan. How many years? 30 years. They end up paying 500, 600. By this time, the home is 60 years old. Less expensive or more expensive? Way more. Now you're selling it for 700, 750. And you walk into this house, you're like, why is anyone paying this kind of money for this pile of garbage? Like these old moldy bricks. This crack, the floor makes sounds. The stairs feel like they're going to cave in any moment. You have unwanted neighbors inside the pipes that you can hear crawling through. And you're paying 10 times, 15 times the price of the original owner who bought it, when it was first made. And so what happens for the next generation, next generation, next generation? Buying that same property becomes more and more and more impossible. Which means the only people who can buy it, is the super rich. And the super rich will buy it, and they'll say, well, I'll give it to you. But I'll give it to you on a mortgage. I'll give it to you on a loan if you qualify. If not, you keep renting from me. I'll keep owning, you keep paying the rent. You keep making me rich, I'll keep the property. And by the way, rent prices will go down or go up. I'll keep going up. We'll keep going. Because this way, what it does is the pound or the dollar or whatever it is going to keep losing value. So what you could buy for £1 50 years ago, you have to pay 15 pounds to buy now. And 10, 15 years from now, you might have to pay 50 pounds to buy the one thing. And the salaries are not increasing at the same rate. The income is not increasing at the same rate. So with riba, what do? You necessarily create a society where the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. And this is not some Islamic observation. If you look at the one social media outlet left where there's some level of free speech, even though it's still very controlled, like TikTok, young people around the world are starting to comment on how the previous generation left them in a hole, and they have to pay the price for it, and this economic crisis is not their doing, and this is oppression, and we need an economic revolution, and anti-bank rhetoric and anti-riba rhetoric is not even coming from Muslims. It's coming now from the next generation, because they're at the bottom, they're at the point where the chokehold is so tight that it's driving people insane. And now they're starting to expose these CEOs and these corporations that are bleeding humanity dry, right? This is riba. By the way, interestingly, one more definition of riba in the Sunnah of the Prophet, even though they're multiple, one more definition of riba in the Sunnah of Rasulullah is what you can call price gouging, which means something is worth $1, but there's high demand, so you can sell it for $2,000, right? Like, people told me that are working in the medical and pharmaceutical research industry, that there are plenty of drugs that are available and there's plenty of research that's possible to do to cure several diseases, and pharmaceutical companies are stopping that research from happening because they cannot sell that pill that they produce for 5 cents that they're selling for $500 a pill. They can't sell that anymore. And many people are dying because they can't afford those pills, which cost them 5 cents, but even doubling their profits, make it for 5 cents, sell it for 10 cents, is not enough for them. They want to make it for 5 cents and sell it for $500 a pill. And that's the only way that, and you know what that means? We're going to exact opposite. Look at the previous passage. How much do you care for humanity that when you give them, you don't even remind them that you gave them? You give in the most sensitive, delicate, beautiful way. And now look at how heartless and how inhumane some people are, that they can watch people die in front of them. In fact, they'll even cause their deaths so long as they can make more. How evil and satanic is that? What greater enemy of humanity can there be? Now you can see why they're being compared to the devil. Why this is the devil's work. Because the devil hates humanity. The devil wants to see humanity suffer in both worlds. So he's creating this environment so that people can, and there's other consequences to this too. When there's enough debt in a society and people are caught in riba, or they're not able to make their payments, they're caught in debt and buried and buried and buried. What happens eventually? Well, then you can't pay for anything. Your job's not enough. You don't have enough for the rent. You don't have enough for the medicine. You don't have enough for the groceries. You don't have enough for your family, your aging parents, your young children, nothing. Crime increases. In those societies, then gambling increases, crime increases, prostitution increases. All the ugly things in society start shooting up in those societies. Murder increases, robbery increases, because poverty has increased. So the poorest areas in the world, the debt-ridden areas in the world, well, you'll see the most crime in them. These things that Allah has mentioned, they're all related to each other. People can't handle their debt, they start drinking. People are thinking, I only have 500 left in the bank. There's no way I can make any payments. Might as well gamble it. Maybe it'll turn into 5,000. They go towards gambling. All those evils are connected to each other. And all of them is what? Shaitan. رِجْسٌ مِّنْ عَمَلِ الشَّيْطَانِ فَاجْتَنِبُوهُ. So an entire system is created. But look at these filthy people. You know what they do? When you question them, they say, إِنَّمَا الْبَيْعُ مِثْلُ الرِّبَى. You were questioning them about riba. So they should have said, riba is just like business. Riba, you're asking me about riba. Riba is no different than business. إِنَّمَا الْبَيْعُ مِثْلُ الرِّبَى. إِنَّمَا الرِّبَى مِثْلُ الْبَيْعِ. But they say, إِنَّمَا الْبَيْعُ مِثْلُ الرِّبَى. They reverse it, which is actually, the best way to describe that to you is, the best defense is offense. Instead of defending themselves and saying, riba is not that different from business, they say, what are you talking about? The way you're talking, we shouldn't even do any business, because business is the same as riba too. You're saying nobody can make any money? You want to shut the entire economy down? This is the way the economy functions. Stupid. So they'll start making you feel like you're the idiot. إِنَّمَا الْبَيْعُ مِثْلُ الرِّبَى. And this is actually one of the things that they do. You'll notice that the most predatory institutions in the world, the predatory lending institutions in the world, they don't use the language, the real language for what they're actually doing. They'll use things like development, growth, right, trajectory. They'll use these other thesaurus words, but never say, predatory lending and price gouging and, the market manipulation. They'll say market adjustment, right? They'll call it. They'll use all the other thesaurus words because زَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالَهُم. This is what they're doing here. إِنَّمَا الْبَيْعُ مِثْلُ الرِّبَى. No, this is business, same as riba. It's just business. And Allah says, instead of engaging with these shayateen to make sense to them how riba is not the same as business, all you need to understand is وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. Allah has made business halal and He has made riba haram. What's the fundamental principle behind riba? It takes advantage of the desperation of people. It sucks the blood from people's hard-earned money. Notice Allah didn't even say those who earn riba, because it's not earned. It's just eaten. الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ الرِّبَى. Right? They're not earning it, because they didn't do any work. They're taking your earnings. They're taking your earnings. That's what they're actually doing. So He says, وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. One thing you should know about haram, this was told to the Israelites once before us, when they were told that the final prophet is coming, meaning Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is coming, Banu Israel were being told. And of the things they were told was when he will come, meaning Muhammadur Rasulullah will come sallallahu alaihi wasallam, يُحِلُّ لَهُمُ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَيُحَرِّمُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْخَبَائِثِ. He will make good and pure things halal for them, and He will make filthy things haram for them. And so every time Allah says or declares something to be halal, by definition, it's not just halal, it's also good and pure. There's goodness in it, there's purity in it. And every time Allah makes something haram, it has to be what? Filthy. It has to be dirty. And it's a disease, it'll spread disease. So when somebody becomes successful in business, in the Muslim community, we say, SubhanAllah, you should be worried about akhirah, you're worried about, look at how much dunya you're making. Meri Jaan, what Quran are you studying? Allah said, Ahallallahu al-bay'. If somebody's doing good business and they're making a halal business and their business is spreading, they had one restaurant, they turned it into 5 restaurants, then they made 50 restaurants. They're saying, astaghfirullah, all these people running after mal. Bro, they started a halal business, which means now there are 500, 1,000, 2,000 people that can work in a halal company. Now these people are making investments in a halal way, and they are supporting other families that are earning halal businesses and are circulating halal money within the Muslim community. Muslims should be developing businesses, because every time Allah makes something halal, it is good and pure. It's good and pure. And we have to develop that mentality. It hurts my feelings. It genuinely hurts my feelings when I go to different Muslim communities in the world, minority communities like this one, where Muslims are a minority in the United Kingdom. And I go there, I came here 15 years ago, and you go to a Muslim neighborhood, and you see the halal shop, and you see the restaurant, and you know the zabiha guy, and the Muslim barber or whatever. And you come 20 years later, and it's the same restaurant, same setup, and the guy's got the little grocery store with the tokri outside, with the little basket, with the mango selling on the street, right? And it looks like a little mini Lahore. It's like a little mini, you know. And it didn't develop. It didn't enhance in any way. In fact, it looks more beat up than it did before, right? And you go to any other neighborhood, what do? The Chinese move to a neighborhood. The Poles move, you know, in America, Australia, everywhere. They'll go somewhere, they'll buy, it's a poor neighborhood. And within 10 years, what do you see? The best schools, the best businesses. Oh, that's because they have riba. No, because they think business. And if, by the way, everything that's halal, Allah puts barakah in it. So if we had the mentality of developing our neighborhoods, developing our businesses, furthering each other, right? Supporting one another, you know, economically enhancing ourselves, we would get to a point where even our masajid, our institutions, they would have their own, you know, waqf markets that are the top markets. They're better than any mall. They're better than any, their neighborhoods are the nicest apartment buildings, they're the cleanest. They own the best hotel. None of it's based on riba. And the money that's coming in from that, they're not even asking for money. They're not even asking the public for funds. The waqf is generating so much money, they're the ones that give money. They're giving loans to young men and women that are getting married and saying, hey, start your job, start your business. Here's how we'll set you up. Here, we'll help you do this, accomplish this, and this, and we'll set you up and we'll facilitate you going to Hajj. Or we'll do this or we can build those kinds of institutions. Other communities have done that. And we say, oh, we can't do it because we can't do riba. No, but you can do business. And Allah put barakah in what's halal. But we don't think like that. We just think we're hyper-individual. We just want to keep, you know, to ourselves. I know I'm going off on track, but this is important. This is part of the fight against riba. You cannot fight riba by just giving khutbahs against riba. You can only fight riba by creating the alternative to riba, and the only alternative to riba is successful business, halal business. That's the only alternative to riba. And what does it do? When a business becomes more successful, then that means you're making more money. And if you're making more money, you're giving more zakat, and you're giving more sadaqah. So more khair is circulating. You see how things are connected to each other? So the earning itself is halal, which is ibadah. The sadaqah that's coming out of that is also has barakah. And you're creating this entire blessed economic system. Blessed, you know, even ecosystem. So Allah says, فَمَنْ جَاءَهُ مَوْعِظَةٌ مِّن رَبِّهِ فَانْتَهَى فَلَهُ مَا سَلَفَ. And for whoever this counsel, this advice reached them, and they stopped consuming riba. They stopped taking advantage of people. They stopped from that. فَلَهُ مَا سَلَفَ. Whatever they ate. وَأَمْرُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ. And their decision is with Allah. وَمَنْ عَادَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. And whoever goes back and keeps wanting to do it, they keep wanting to earn money by these illegitimate means, by riba means, then those are the people of fire in which they will remain. This is the same passage later on that Allah will describe that people that don't want to get away from riba and keep sucking the blood of humanity, these are people at war with Allah and His Messenger. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. فَأْذَنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. The last thing I'll share with you about this notion of someone touched by shaitan. They're a danger to themselves and others. Like I said, a crazy guy could stab somebody, not even feel anything. These people, they're wearing nice silk ties and Italian wool suits, sitting in executive offices, while one signature they made is taking 1,000 families and removing them from their homes. shutting down entire factories, and people are becoming homeless and starving and dying. These are the same people that make executive decisions, and because of them, many wars are starting because of multi-billion-dollar companies. It's not even because of a political motive, it's an economic motive. It's either a gas pipeline or an oil pipeline or it's some kind of mineral resource, and it's looking like, oh, we're bringing democracy. No, you're not. You're bringing the bottom line. There are corporations behind you that are pushing this. That's a riba agenda. That's a shaitani agenda. These people have no feeling towards what they do up there when they make these kinds of decisions, right? So we have to understand that. We have to understand who the true culprit is. We, for the longest time, Muslims have, wanted to go back to the glory days, right? And we have this idea of how things used to be so amazing. I've talked to you in an earlier session here about how we're always thinking about the glorious past. Allah didn't create you to cry about the past. Allah created you and me now, because we were the best suited to be created now. You were brought up in whatever society you were brought up in. You were brought up in the environment that you were brought up in because you were the best suited to make the positive changes in that time, in that place, in that century. That's why you were put there. Allah puts everything in the proper place. This is, by the way, one of the meanings of the word dhulm is you put something in the wrong place. You put something in the, when some of you young guys get really fired up, I wish I was born in the time of the Sahaba. Allah is not dhallam lil abid. He doesn't make a mistake. He doesn't wrong his slaves. Oh, I was born in a time of fitna. You know what the fitna is? That you don't understand that you were sent to this time because there's fitna. And the best solution to that fitna was you. That's why He sent you there. That's why He created you. That's the purpose of this ummah, is to understand a problem and to solve a problem. But we've become addicted to crying about a problem and not thinking about the solutions to a problem. And even when we think about the solution, we're like, we need a solution today. Look at all of the examples Allah is giving. Plant a seed, water the seed, let the crop go, plant it again. Is that short-term thinking or long-term thinking? It's long-term. If you're giving fiery khutbahs about the ummah is asleep and we have to wake up, then 20 years later, guess what? You're going to give another khutbah, the ummah is asleep and we have to wake up. And there's no planning. You just get this little dopamine hit. Oh, mashallah, the khutbah. Oh. And you're going to go from a young man to a gray beard hearing khutbahs about the ummah is asleep. And you're going to feel good about yourself because somebody cried about it. We're addicted to the crying now. Other people are addicted to drugs. Others are addicted to alcohol. We're addicted to the Islamic dopamine hit. Come on, wake up. It's time we got serious. It's time we got planning. Allah has given us an agenda. And if we don't understand that the greatest engine behind the evil in the world, one of the greatest engines is riba. The colonization of India, the colonization of Muslims in Africa, the colonization of Muslims across Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia, the colonization of the Dutch by over Indonesia, Malaysia areas, the colonization of the Pakistan, what is now Pakistan, India, by the British. None of that was possible without the riba banks. The banks funded all of that. They did it. We think, they came with, what did they come with? They came with an economic plan. They didn't come with a military plan. You guys live in the UK. The first time I came to the UK, you know what I was thinking? Because I drove from one end to the other. I drove to Scotland from London. I drove to Glasgow. And I was thinking, this place is like a spit on the map. It's like, Nadia, how did they take over the world? And then I'm looking at the country. Most of it is farmland. They don't even let you develop. And then you go, and these people, they were bigger than the Roman Empire. If you look at the British Empire, historically, it was larger in size than the Roman Empire. And I'm driving down a neighborhood in London, and driving down a neighborhood even in Manchester, somewhere else, and I'm like, they got all that money in the world, and this is the neighborhoods they made? Where'd that money go, yo? Because it didn't go here. And you know what that is? That is the genius of their economic planning. That is the East India Company. That's the genius of their plan. They had a business plan, and that business plan eventually led to the development of an entire empire. Where is the Muslim business plan? Where's the business plan? And business plan is not made from the top down. It's people that are entrepreneurial, that have a vision, that grow something and turn it into an enterprise. They create a culture. So this is the mentality that we have to develop. We have to fight riba, the haram investment of money, with bay', the halal investment of money. And then that bay' produces sadaqah. That bay' produces khair for the ummah. That produces infaq fi sabilillah. Otherwise, we're just going to remain masakeen and be crying about banks and banks and banks. We have to destroy the banks. No, the banks will not be destroyed until you come up with a better alternative, until you produce more powerful economic engines. And we have enough people. We have enough people to be able to do that. Final observation on this, I'll tell you, because you can tell maybe I have some business background. So I was in Pakistan about a year ago. I was driving through Pakistan. And I drove from Lahore all the way to Peshawar and made many stops along the way. And I'm just looking at this country and so much farmland and so much, just beautiful landscape and villages and people everywhere, just people. Do you know in economics what the most important asset you can have is? It's people. The greatest economic engine of a society is people. You know, the Australians have so much land, they don't have enough people. So you know what they did? For a long time, they kept pulling in immigrants because they don't have enough people to start an economic practice. They don't have enough people. Our countries, we got people, man. We got people. And then it burned me that I'm driving down this no-name town near Multan and there's a McDonald's on the corner. And I'm like, these people understand that they can make money even from the poorest countries, some of the poorest struggling countries in the world, they can make money from them. Just set up a McDonald's there, there'll always be a line. There'll always be a line. And we didn't understand it. We didn't get it. The only thing that gets in the way, of the Muslims getting ahead is our own corruption. It's the only reason. Why would somebody not invest in a Muslim country? The government, the local situation, who are you going to give a contract to? The more the guy says, inshallah, the more you should run. The more, I learned in Pakistan, the more somebody says, befikr ho jaye. Don't even worry about it. That is when you should worry the most. The guy that says, don't worry about it, that is the biggest worry you will have in your life. Leave it to me. That actually means I'm going to leave you with all your, leave it with me. Right? SubhanAllah. If we could just fix our character problem, our integrity problem, the resources, the economic resources, the talent, the creativity, the ingenuity is all there in the ummah. The only thing missing is our integrity. That's the only thing missing. If we just had integrity in the way that we did business, we would no doubt be the most powerful economic engine on the planet. And as a result, we wouldn't, and I've said this before, but I know this is the time to say it. I'm just going to give you one example. What's happening in Palestine, the entire Muslim world is crying, but there's no need to listen. From the people that are perpetrating these crimes, they have no need to listen. Then look at what happens in China. What China is doing to the Uyghur Muslims, they've been doing for a long time. And you can give a speech about it, you can protest against it, but if Muslim countries say, hey, we don't like what you're doing to the Muslims in China, right? The Chinese will say, no, we're not going to threaten you with military. We're not going to attack you. We're not going to point our missiles at you. No. We'll just pull out all our investments from your port in Indonesia. We'll pull all of our investment on the highways we're building in Pakistan. We're just going to stop exporting to you. See how that works out for you. And anybody they have economic ties with learns to what? Learns to shut up. Even the big bad US can speak out against what's happening to the Uyghur. Joe Biden spoke about it at one point. What did it matter? China's like, okay, want to mess with us? We can pull out our investments out of the US too. We got enough investments in the US. Real power has become economic power. And they don't even have to open their mouth. They can just keep doing what they're doing and nobody's going to touch them because they have the economic juice to do it. When Muslims say, you better listen to us, the world says, and if we don't, what's going to happen? Who depends on you? What power do you have? What investments are you going to pull out? What influence do you have? Right? If you're the beneficiaries, we're the ones giving you loans, we're the ones supporting your economies, you're dependent on us. We're not dependent on you, that's what they say. So why should you? You can cry all you want. You're our dependents. This is the formula of economic empowerment that Allah Azza wa Jal has given an indication towards when He says, وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. And ahalla, interestingly, halal doesn't just mean permissible. Halla in Arabic is to open up a knot, to unleash. Allah wants the business to spread. And He wants riba to be contained. He wants riba to be contained. وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. And that's the mindset that we should bring to this. May Allah Azza wa Jal allow us to develop that kind of a mindset for His sake. And may Allah Azza wa Jal allow all of us to earn and to spread the halal business strategy for this entire ummah so that we can become what Allah Azza wa Jal wants us to become. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'an al-Hakim wa nafa'ani wa iyyakum bil ayat wa dhikr al-Hakim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.